Hey there, my friend, and welcome back to the CEO Soapbox Podcast, episode number 20. And if you're new here, welcome. I am your host, Neda Farzad, and this podcast is where we talk honestly about business, how to lead it better, how to grow it smarter, and how to stop making it harder than it needs to be. And today we're talking about chaos in business. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quieter kind. The kind that chips away from the business from the inside through rework, messy handovers, cross wires, things getting dropped, things getting redone, and people wasting time cleaning up shit that should have been done properly the first time. You know the kind? So let's get into it. Here's something I see all the time. A business starts feeling heavy, and everyone assumes the problem is capacity. They think the team's overloaded. They think they need more people. They think the answer is another layer, another hire, another tool, another meeting, and another bloody workaround. And sometimes it is true. But a lot of time, that's not what's going on. A lot of businesses are not actually drowning in work. They are drowning in mess. Mess in how work gets handed over, mess in how information moves, mess in who owns what, mess in what was promised, what was understood, and what actually got delivered. And because it shows up in bits and pieces across the business, it often gets dismissed as just being busy or just part of a growth. I'm here to tell you it's not. A lot of what gets called busy is actually just expensive disorder in a business. And that's the bit leaders don't want to look at too closely, because once you do, you realize the business isn't just under pressure. It's making simple things harder than it needs to be. And that has a cost, a very real one. This problem rarely shows up in some neat, obvious way. It doesn't arrive with a big flashing sign saying business is leaking profit through avoidable operational nonsense. It shows up in smaller moments. A client asks for an update on something that teams thought has already been covered. Sales wins the job. But what was sold isn't fully clear by the time it lands with the service or project or delivery team. A brief gets passed on half-baked, so the next person fills in the gaps themselves. Or someone assumes, and we all know what happens when we assume, someone assumes another team has picked it up. They haven't. A job goes out with something missing. Someone catches it late, and hopefully it's not the client. Now it needs fixing, which means another person gets pulled in, which pushes something else back. Nobody sets out to create this mess. And that's what makes it tricky. It's usually not a sabotage. It's not laziness. It's not people doing nothing. It's good people working inside the business where the flow of work is clunky, unclear, inconsistent, or way too dependent on verbal context, memory, urgency, or someone just knowing. And when that becomes normal, people stop challenging it. That's when you start hearing things like, we've just got a lot on, or it's been a hectic few weeks. My favorite, the team's doing their best. Another one is, we're moving quickly. Sure. But sometimes what we say is when we say we are moving quickly, it's just a nicer way of saying we are creating extra work for ourselves at every stage. My friend, that's not momentum. That's drag with good PR. So if you're running a business and this is happening, it usually looks familiar. So what it looks like is it looks like the same issue popping up in different departments in slightly different ways. It looks like work being touched too many times before it actually complete. It looks like people asking for context that should have already been provided. It looks like internal updates taking longer than they should because no one's fully sure where something sits. It looks like a team member doing their part, but the next person still has to chase, decode, or interpret what they've been given. It looks like project delays that no one wants to call delay because everyone's technically still working hard. It looks like leaders getting dragged into details they should not need to touch. It looks like clients getting inconsistent signals depending on who they speak to. It looks like things being nearly done for 3 days. It looks like everyone being flat out, but no one feeling like the business is actually flowing. And let's be honest, that kind of environment does not just waste time. It wears people down. Because it creates this constant low-grade friction in the business. Nothing is fully smooth. Nothing is fully clear. Nothing is fully settled. Everything takes a bit more effort than it should. And when that keeps happening, people start adjusting. You hearing me? Your people starts adjusting to the dysfunction instead of fixing it. That's when chaos becomes culture. Not because anyone chose that on purpose, but because the business got used to carrying. And this is where I think people get it wrong. A lot of standard advice around this stuff is too vague to be useful. A lot of standard advice from so-called experienced business coaches, it's too vague to be useful. You hear business coaches, consultants, and so-called business experts say, you need better communication. Okay, fine. But that's a lazy advice unless you get much more specific. So tell me, you got to ask better communication about what? Between who? At what point? With what level of detail? And who is responsible for making sure the message is actually usable, not just technically sent? Because a handover is not successful just because someone mentioned something in a meeting. It's not successful because there's a note in Slack. It's not successful because something was dumped into a CRM. And it's definitely not successful because one person says, I thought they knew. That line alone has probably cost businesses shitload of money. And that's not just for small businesses. Another thing that gets me, you also hear these experts say, you need better systems and process. Maybe, but let's not pretend a documented process automatically fixes poor discipline in business. I've seen plenty of businesses with decent systems that still operates like a mess because the real issue wasn't the existence of the process. It was the lack of clear ownership, consistent standards, operational maturity, and leadership follow-through around it. A process does not save you. The process does not save business if people are skipping key thinking, handing over incomplete work, making assumptions, or saying yes to things upstream that creates chaos downstream. And here's another one that gets thrown around far too casually. This is just what growth looks like. No, straight N-O. Some complexity comes with growth. Absolutely, I agree with it. But repeated internal mess, it's not some badge of ambition. This is not scale. That's strain pretending to be progress. And there is a difference. A business that is growing well may be stretched. A business that's growing badly becomes heavier every time it wins more work. That's not the same thing. And if I had to point to one place this gets created over and over again, it's in the handover process. Again, I've seen it in Fortune 500, I've seen it in small businesses, or even seen it in startup. Poor handovers are one of the biggest hidden problem in business, growing, scaling, or not. Because most of the real pain doesn't live neatly inside one department. You see, it lives in the gaps between them, between sales and project, between sales and operations, between sales and delivery, between strategy and execution, between account management and operation, between the founders and the leadership team, between someone said it and someone actually owns it. That's where the things start wobbling. A handover is not just one person finishing their bit and moving on. A proper handover means the next person can pick the work up cleanly without having to become a detective. They know what's been agreed. They know what matters. They know what the client expects. They know what's already been decided. They know what the risks are. They know what happens next. And they know what they now own. That's a proper handover. Not a half-assed summary, not a forwarded email with no context, not it should all be there somewhere in a drive, or no, just ask Sarah, she knows. If the next person has to reconstruct the work before they can continue it, that handover was weak as piss. And weak handover creates three things over and over again in your business. It creates confusion, it creates delay, and it creates rework. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, but always, always expensively. Because now the business is paying people not just to do the job, but to interpret it or fix it and chase it and smooth over the bits that should have been cleaned in the first place. That's not a small issue. That's a direct, big, massive commercial issue. And once that becomes normal, here's what it starts costing. It chews margin. Every time a task has to be redone, checked again, clarified, escalated, or corrected, the business is spending money. Your business, your department is spending money on work that should not need a second pass. And the annoying part is that it often doesn't show up so neatly. There's no obvious report called, here's how much profit we lost because we kept making ordinary work harder than necessary. No, instead it hides. Where it hides is it hides in extra hours, in blown estimates, in underquoted jobs, in time spent chasing updates, in senior people in the owner getting pulled into avoidable issues, in delivery teams fixing problems created upstream, in clients needing extra reassurance because confidence got dented. Revenue can still look fine on paper, while profit gets quietly chipped away in the back. That's why some businesses look busy, look successful, and still feels heavier than it should. The money is coming in, but too much of it, it's being absorbed by internal friction. Another thing, chaos also destroys usable capacity. I'm not talking about headcount capacity. I'm talking about real capacity. You see, when people are constantly switching gears, checking details, correcting assumptions, re-explaining context, and recovering this sloppy transfer, they're not using their time well and efficient. They are burning it, my friend. So the business says, we need more people. Maybe you do. But I've seen a lot of businesses hire into mess instead of cleaning it up first. Now, you've got more salaries, more moving parts, and the same clunky operating rhythm underneath it all. That's just adding costs around confusion. Clients feel this too, even when they can't explain it properly, but they can feel it. They can feel it in you. They feel it when they have to repeat themselves. When different people tell them different things. When timing gets weird. When details get missed. When simple requests somehow become hard work. When the business sounds confident in the pitch and patchy in the delivery. Clients might not say your internal transfer points are undercooked. You know what they'll say? Just checking where this landed. Or I'm a little unclear on the next steps. Or they should say, I thought this had already been covered. Or can someone confirm who's handling this? Or my favorite one, I'm confused. I'm getting mixed messages. This is the client-facing version of internal mess, my friend. And once confidence starts wobbling, your commercial position weakens. Because trust is not only built through the final result, it's built through how the whole experience feels to your clients. And then there's a leadership energy, which is the one I think leaders feel most, even if they don't always say it properly. When the business is full of chaos, rework, and poor handoffs, leaders end up becoming the glue. They become the interpreter, the cleanup crew, the one who spots the missing details. I hope it's them, not the customer. The one who knows the real context. The one who jumps in because it's quicker than letting the confusion drag on. And because they're capable, they keep doing it, which is understandable, but it also teaches the business something very dangerous. What it teaches is, hey, when things are unclear, someone senior will sort it out. The owner will sort it out. The manager will sort it out. That creates dependency very quickly. Then leaders start wondering why they're still stuck in the weeds, why everything still comes through them, and why the business needs so much intervention to keep moving. That's why, because unresolved mess always travels upward, my friend. Now, and chaos is exhausting for teams too. Ooh, especially for your good people. You see, high performers do not love spending their time cleaning up poor briefs, fixing assumptions, translating between teams, and carrying context that should already exist in the system through the handover. They can do it. That's the problem. They are competent enough to absorb the mess. So the business gets away with it longer than it should. Meanwhile, average performers get harder to judge because standards are blurry and expectations are inconsistent. Then frustration builds. One team thinks another team is careless. Another thinks the first team overpromises. Someone feels like they're always the one picking up the slack. Someone else feels blamed for decisions they didn't make. And slowly, the culture becomes more reactive, more defensive, and more tired. That's what repeated mess does. It doesn't just create inefficiency. It chips away at trust inside the business too. So here's the reframe I want to give you. Chaos is not just an annoying ops problem. It's a sign that the business is carrying more ambiguity than it should. And ambiguity, we all know, is expensive in anything. but we're talking about business here. If work keeps getting dropped, works keep getting dropped, redone, misunderstood, delayed, and escalated, that tells you something. It tells you as a leader, as a business owner, as a CEO, as an MD, the business has not created enough clarity around how work moves. That could be the role clarity. That could be the decision clarity, the commercial clarity as to what to say yes and what we don't say yes to, ownership clarity, handover clarity, priority clarity. Usually it's some combination of all of them. And that's why I don't think this topic should ever be brushed off as just process or admin. This is about how the business is designed to function. Because poor flow is rarely a random thing, my friend. It usually comes from vague scoping at the front end, unclear accountability, inconsistent standards, too many expectations or exceptions, not clear definition of ready, not clear definition of done, leaders overriding a normal path, teams operating with different assumptions, or a culture where urgency gets rewarded more than clarity and quality. That last one catches a lot of businesses. Everything feels urgent. Everyone's responsive. Everyone's moving. Everyone's trying to be helpful. But when urgency becomes a default operating model, clarity often gets sacrificed. Quality often gets sacrificed. Then the business ends up doing a second lap. And that second lap is expensive. So speed without clarity creates rework. And rework is one of the easiest way to quietly kill the margin. And leaders are often part of the pattern without meaning to be. Because you got to remember, if you're pointing fingers at someone else, there's three fingers pointing right back at you. And not because you're a bad leader, not because of that, because you're moving fast, solving problems and trying to keep things going. But here's how leaders accidentally feed the chaos. They tolerate fuzzy ownership. They let work move forward before the front end is clear. They approve exceptions too often, so many times. They allow commercial promises without enough delivery challenge. They answer questions too quickly instead of forcing better thinking. They jump in to save time without fixing the reason the issue existed from the beginning. They reward responsiveness more than rigor. They praise people for heroic without questioning why the heroics keep being needed. That last one is big. A lot of businesses are being held together by good people doing extra emotional and operational labor every week in the business. And because those people are reliable, leadership starts unconsciously building around that. But if the same people keep having to rescue the business from preventable mess, that's not a people solution. That's a structural warning. If your business only works because good people keep covering the gaps, that's not the strength. That's over-reliance wearing a nice outfit. So, what do you do about that? Here's what I start. Stop describing everything as busy. If every issue gets labeled as we've just been slammed, you stay too vague to fix anything properly. I want you to be more precise. Is the issue poor scoping, weak handoff, decision confusion, no clear owner, sales to delivery disconnect or team to team disconnect, leader dependency, too many exceptions, missing standards? Call the thing what it is. You cannot solve a pattern you keep describing lazily. Then find the repeat points. This is very important. Don't just focus on the latest blow up. Look at what happens again and again. Where does work regularly stall? Where do people keep chasing information? Where do clients get mixed messages? Where do senior people in your team keep stepping in? Or where you as a business owner stepping in? Where is work being redone that should have been right the first time? That repeat pain is where the real work is. That's your data. Because repeated friction usually means the design is weak, not your people. Then we want to audit the handover points too. Map the main transfers across the business. Sales to delivery, sales to operations, sales to project, delivery to finance, account management to operations, founder, you to your leadership team, you to the rest of the team, one project stage to the next. Then ask, what exactly needs to move here? What usually goes missing? What assumptions are people making? Who owns the quality of this transfer? How do we know the next person is set up properly? What gets lost most often? Most businesses don't break first inside. Most businesses don't break first inside the function. They break at the seams. That's where you need to look. Then I want you to define what ready means. You see, a lot of work gets pushed forward before it's actually ready. That creates downstream pains every single time. Because before something moves to the next stage, what must be true? What has to be clear? What decisions must already be made? What information must be included? What commercial realities need to be confirmed? What client expectations need to be locked in? If that isn't defined, people will make it up as they go. And that's where the mess starts. Assumption. And we all know what happens when you assume. Now, it's not just about ready. You need to next define what done means too. A lot of people think they've finished something when they've only finished their bit of it. That's not the same as the work being completed. Not mostly done, not close enough. Actually done and completed. Then this is what I do, then we need to tighten the front end as well. A lot of downstream chaos starts right at the beginning. It's either bad scoping, loose promises, optimistic assumptions, clients being told yes before delivery has had a proper say. That creates pain later. So ask yourself, are we winning work cleanly? Are we pricing reality or wishful thinking? Are we being too flexible too early? Are we setting the team up well before the work even begins? Because a lot of operation problems start life as commercial sloppiness. Then I want you to watch the rescue patterns too. This is what I mean. I want you to pay attention to where leaders, your team managers, or yourself as an owner, depending on the size of your business, you got to see where the leaders or yourself keep stepping in. Those moments are data. They show you where clarity is missing, where capability is thin, or where ownership has gone soft. Don't just fix the individual issue, study the pattern, because what leadership keeps rescuing, the business rarely learns to handle properly on its own. And then we want to reduce exception. Some businesses are addicted to customizing everything. Every client is special. Every request gets squeezed in. Every process gets bent. Every standard becomes negotiable. Then everyone acts shocked when the place feels messy. Consistency is what gives a business flow. Without it, You're not managing work. You're managing constant variation. That gets expensive very fast for your business. Then I want you to, when we've done all of that, I want you to treat rework like a proper business issue. Problem. I'm not talking about challenge. Don't tell me, oh, we don't talk. We don't say it's a problem. We say it's a challenge. No. Rework, I want you to look at it as a real problem. Not an annoyance, not a side effect, not just part of it. Track it. How often is work being redone? Why? Where? What kind? What did it cost? What stage created it? Because once you start measuring the second lap, you stop romanticizing effort. You start seeing the price of disorder more clearly in your business, and that changes the quality of decision. So, before I wrap this up, here are a few questions I think are worth sitting with as a business owner, as a CEO, as a leader of the business. Where in the business are smart people wasting time on avoidable rubbish? What keeps needing a second pass? Where does work rely too heavily on memory, verbal context, or certain people just knowing? It's very dangerous. What are your best people compensating for that the business should have solved by now? Where do clients feel more friction than they should? What are you still calling a capacity issue that is actually a clarity issue? Where has mess become normal because the team has learned to cope with it? That last one matters because businesses can tolerate a surprising amount of internal drag when the people are capable enough. But tolerance is not business health all the time. And coping is not the same as operating well. So here's the point I really want to leave you with. Chaos, rework, and poor handovers are not harmless growing pain. They quietly chew through margin, time, trust, and leadership energy. They make the business heavier. They make good people more tired. They pull leaders into places they should not have to be. And they create a version of the growth that looks fine from the outside, but it feels clunky as hell on the inside. This is not about making the business look tidier for the sake of it. It's about making the business easier to run, easier to lead, and more commercially sound, because when work moves cleanly, everything improves. Decision-making improves. Delivery improves. Client confidence improves. Capacity improves. Profit improves. And leadership gets some breathing room back. So, if things feel harder than they should, don't just assume that's the cost of the growth. Have a proper look at have a proper look at how work is moving through the business. Because often the problem is not the amount of work. It's the amount of avoidable mess wrapped around it. So if this episode felt a bit too familiar, it's worth paying attention to. Because some of the biggest improvements in business don't come from adding more people, adding more tools, adding more meetings, or adding more noise. They come from getting honest about the friction you as a business leader normalize. The things everyone works around, the things no one names properly, the things that keeps costing more than they should. Once you see that clearly, you can do something about it. Not with fluff. Ooh, I hate fluff. Not with corporate nonsense, not with another round of vague talk about communication, but with clear standards, cleaner ownership, better operational discipline, and leaders who stop accepting preventable mess as the price of doing business or as part of a growth. Thanks for being here with me on CEO Soapbox Podcast. If this episode helps you put words around something that's been frustrating you for a while, make sure you subscribe and please share it with someone else who'll get value from it too. And if your business is growing but still feel clunky and reactive or too dependent on you and people holding it together through sheer effort, come find me on LinkedIn. This is the kind of work I help leaders with every day, making the business easier to run, clear to lead, and less reliant on overcompensation and crossed fingers. Wishing you an amazing week ahead, my friend. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, especially to yourself. Bye for now.